A small country you would never expect to be this powerful. Why? Do they have an enormous military? Thousands of missiles? Or maybe a country overflowing with money? What exactly is the true measure of a nation's power? Think about this. There is a fund in the world. It holds shares in thousands of companies. Companies across different countries. Companies that make smartphones, computer chips, medicine, banks, even airlines. When you add up the value of all those investments, it exceeds $2 trillion. That is larger than the entire economy of many countries. Now the question is, who controls this fund? The United States? China? What if I told you it is controlled by a country with only about 5.5 million people, a country full of snow, fjords, and quiet cities in Northern Europe? That country is Norway. At first glance, Norway looks like an ordinary country, calm, orderly, rarely in the headlines. But behind that quiet exterior, Norway has built a system that gives it enormous influence over the global economy. How did this happen? How did a small snow-covered country become one of the biggest investors on Earth? Let's talk about that. Norway is a country in Northern Europe, in the region called Scandinavia. Despite being quiet today, it has an incredibly rich history. Especially during the age of the Vikings, it is not a large country by size. It covers approximately 385,000 square kilometers, with a population of only about 5.5 million people. But despite its size, Norway is strikingly beautiful. If you visit, you will immediately understand why. It is one of the most popular tourist destinations in the world. You will be amazed by their fjords, extremely deep bodies of water. Surrounded by steep mountains, you will also see snow-covered peaks, crystal clear lakes, and the famous northern lights dancing across the sky. But beyond Norway's natural beauty, there is something else truly remarkable. They are incredibly wealthy. Norway ranks among the countries with the highest standards of living in the world, measured by the Human Development Index and GDP per capita. So how did a country with a small population become this wealthy? For a long time, Norway was not even recognized as an economic superpower. Norway was not always rich. In the middle of the 20th century, they were not among the wealthiest nations in Europe. Their government was well run. Their democracy was stable. But their economy relied on just a few key industries: fishing, logging, and shipping, maritime trade. For many years, Norwegians were known as skilled seafarers. Their shipping industry played a major role in transporting goods around the world. But even with these important industries, Norway was not as wealthy as other Western European nations. In short, Norway back then was a stable and well-managed country, but not yet an economic powerhouse. Everything was about to change because of one event in 1969, a discovery that would redirect Norway's economy and transform the future of the entire nation. In the 1960s, some energy companies began to suspect something. There were large oil reserves beneath the North Sea. The North Sea is the body of water between Norway and the United Kingdom. Because of this, many companies began exploring the seabed, searching for oil. One of those companies was Phillips Petroleum, an American oil company. In 1969, while drilling beneath the sea, they found something enormous, a massive oil deposit. They called it the Ekofisk oil field. This was not just any ordinary oil field. It was one of the largest offshore oil discoveries in the world at that time. And this is where a new chapter in Norway's history began. Here is what usually happens when oil is discovered in a country. Foreign oil companies come in to explore and drill. They have the technology, they have the capital, and they usually take the largest share of the profits, while the country where the oil came from gets very little. But Norway did not allow that. They made a major decision back in 1963, before large-scale drilling even began in the North Sea. The Norwegian government issued an important declaration. They stated that all natural resources on the Norwegian continental shelf belong to the state of Norway. That means if oil is found beneath those waters, it does not belong to foreign companies. It belongs to the nation. They still allowed international oil companies to help develop the oil fields. But the terms were clear. Norway would benefit the most. To ensure the country had control, they created a national energy company in 1972. It was originally called Statoil, known today as Equinor. Through this company, the Norwegian government directly participated in developing the oil fields and received a large share of the profits from oil. To this day, the Norwegian government still holds more than 60% of the company. That means even with private investors, control remains in the hands of the nation. Over the years, Norway's oil industry grew and grew. It gradually became one of the largest producers of oil and natural gas in Europe. And as production increased, so did the country's income. But Norway understood something important. The price of oil is not stable. Sometimes it is high. Sometimes it crashes. If a country depends entirely on oil, its economy can suddenly collapse when prices fall, especially when global demand drops, or there is too much supply in the world market. Many countries have experienced this problem. Economists call it the resource curse. This is the situation where a country rich in natural resources fails to truly develop, because it is too dependent on one single industry. A well-known example is Venezuela. Venezuela has one of the largest oil reserves in the world, but it experienced a devastating economic crisis. Because its economy relied so heavily on oil, Norway did not want that to happen to them. So they created a unique plan, a system where the income from oil would not just be spent today, but saved and invested for the future of the country. In 1990, the Norwegian parliament passed a law to establish the Government Petroleum Fund, often simply called the Oil Fund. This became the foundation of a system where the nation's income from oil and gas is saved. The first deposit into the fund was made in 1996, after the country had a budget surplus from oil revenues. 2 years later, in 1998, it began investing in international financial markets. In 2006, it was renamed the Government Pension Fund Global, the name it still carries today. At first glance, it sounds like just a retirement fund, but it is one of the largest investment funds in the entire world. Here is how it works. Norway's income from oil and natural gas is not immediately spent by the government. Instead, it is placed into the fund. Then that fund is invested in various assets around the world. Stocks, bonds, real estate. Over time, the fund kept growing, and growing, until it reached more than 21 trillion Norwegian kroner by the end of 2025, which is equivalent to approximately $2 trillion US. Because of this, it is recognized as the largest sovereign wealth fund in the world. Because the fund is so massive, it needs to invest in an enormous number of companies across different countries. Currently, it holds investments in approximately 9,000 companies worldwide, including some of the biggest companies on the planet: Apple, Microsoft, Amazon, Alphabet, the parent company of Google, Nvidia, and Tesla. They are not majority owners. Usually they hold just a small percentage in each company. Yes, just a small piece. But think about what happens when you add all those investments together. The influence is enormous. In fact, Norway is estimated to own more than 1.4% of all publicly listed stocks in the entire world. That means in countless major companies across different countries, a small piece belongs to Norway. But even with enormous investments around the world, Norway does not just buy shares blindly. They are also active in shareholder meetings of the companies they invest in. In 2024, the Government Pension Fund Global voted in more than 11,000 shareholder meetings across companies worldwide. In these meetings, important company decisions are discussed: how the company is run, how much top executives are paid, and how the company addresses issues related to the environment and human rights. If there is a policy they do not support, they can vote against it. And because they are one of the largest investors in the world, companies take their voice seriously. The fund also has clear rules about which types of companies it will not invest in. They do not invest in companies that violate human rights, companies that harm the environment, or companies that produce weapons like nuclear arms. Some companies have already been removed from their investment portfolio because of these kinds of issues. In this way, Norway demonstrates that it is possible to earn from investments while still following ethical standards in business. Norway is incredibly wealthy. With the amount of money they control, they could buy major companies, control entire industries, or use their wealth to apply political pressure on other nations, like what some other large investors and sovereign wealth funds do. But that is not the path Norway chose. Despite having an enormous fund, Norway is rarely in the headlines. There are reasons for this. First, the fund is extremely transparent. They regularly release to the public exactly where the money is invested and how large their holdings are. Because the information is open, it does not become controversial or mysterious, so it rarely becomes major news. Second, they do not use the fund as a political weapon. The primary purpose is long-term investment for the future of the country. and for the next generations of Norwegian citizens. Third, Norway is known as a stable and democratic country, with clear governance policies. So even with their enormous financial influence on the global economy, other countries rarely view them as a threat. With the scale of their investment income serving as the nation's savings, Norway has enough financial buffer to remain economically stable, even through the next several decades, even if income from oil and gas weakens or disappears entirely. When most people think of a powerful country, they think of large militaries, nuclear weapons, or giant economies. But Norway has shown there is another kind of power. Quiet, not aggressive. Through smart management and investing, Norway has proven something. Even a small country can have enormous influence over the economy of the entire world.